There's a lot of things online at the moment purporting to give legal advice to people who are not wearing masks. First of all, it's perfectly legitimate and doesn't make a person a crank to be an anti-masker. What makes a person a crank is their behaviour, particularly their behaviour in public, or perhaps remarks that they might put out online, or perhaps advice that they give others. That can make people into a crank. Simply being an anti-masker does not make a person into a crank. It's gaslighting to suggest otherwise. There was an article a while ago in the Irish Times by Conor Gallagher, which was a slander piece, a hit piece on anti-maskers. But Conor Gallagher latched onto Dee Wall or Dolores Webster and the faulty legal advice that Dolores Webster has been giving out to people. Now, I personally, I'm just speaking from my own experience, I haven't worn a mask once since the statutory instrument pertaining to them was brought in by the Irish government in August of 2020. I took a look at the statutory instrument and I realised that you can claim an exemption for extreme distress and you can claim an exemption for difficulty breathing. And if you are claiming those exemptions and you're challenged, it doesn't say anywhere in the statutory instrument that you have to prove it. That means that you don't have to prove it. That means that you have to be taken at your word. That's just an interpretation of the law. The law does not say that there's a burden of proof on anyone to prove either difficulty breathing or extreme distress. So, I'm not giving legal advice as such. I'm just reading the facts of the law here. So, having said that, though, I'm not looking for trouble. I haven't worn a mask once since August. On one occasion, a busybody, just before Christmas, called the guards on me in a supermarket for not wearing a mask. He'd complained about me to the management of the supermarket and they told him that they'd no complaint about me because I'd already sought permission not to wear a mask. I had written in to the branch manager by email saying that I did not want to wear a mask on the premises. When the guards came, they told me no complaint to be made against me, so they'd nothing to say to me, and they escorted the complainant off the premises. So that's how I dealt with it. I didn't live stream anybody, I didn't video anybody. I reserve the right to video situations where I think there may be evidence that could be usable in court. I haven't seen any such thing in relation to masks and me so far. I've not been refused service in any shop since August, not once. One shop told me to wait outside, they'd serve me out the door. I said that's fine. I am not discourteous to anybody in shops. I don't give them a lecture. I don't tell them to wake up. I don't tell them to do the research. That's not my place. They can do any research they want to. I think a lot of people are becoming increasingly sceptical about this. If you're not becoming increasingly sceptical, then that's a bigger problem because you belong to a cult. Not my problem. We can do cult busting in another video. We can do it at another time. But I want to get back to the issue of the legal advice being given to people. I'm seeing things online. You must be very sceptical about what you see online. So I'm just taking them at face value. One woman said that she went into a grocery shop somewhere in County Wexford and was refused admission and was told she couldn't be there, despite having an exemption. What she should have done then was, don't be talking about going to solicitors or suing. A shop has the right to refuse you admission. Now, that could be a grey area where it's the only shop that you can buy your food. They could probably argue that you can order it online and get it delivered, which is true. But what I suggested to that person was that she write a brief email to the manager saying that she was unhappy with the treatment that she received. She has an exemption from wearing masks. She's claiming her exemption and she'd like it not to happen again. You don't need to be claiming disability laws or equal employment laws or that kind of thing. Don't be running to claiming laws that may not support you or that may not actually be relevant, because when you go to court you'll find that the judges are very experienced at the existing jurisprudence that comes from the High Court saying how they should interpret these particular laws. So for example, while a shop has the right to refuse you admission, a shop is also considered a public place under the Public Order Act of 1994. Why is that? Because members of the public are able to go in there or can assume that they can go in there. So that's why a shop or a pub or a hotel or that kind of thing has the status of a public place. They still have the right to tell you to get out. You don't have any recourse on that unless you could claim you were being discriminated against for being in an ethnic minority. But I think shops are very reluctant to say that now. Very, very reluctant to say that now. In any event, let's talk now about medical exemptions and that kind of thing. Um, Around Christmas of 2020, I was talking on two separate occasions to two women in a shop. They were wearing a mask. I wasn't wearing a mask. They told me to stand back because, according to them, my breath smelled so bad and was so strong that they could smell it through their masks. Now, I said to them, that proves that the masks aren't working and that it's a scam. But it didn't seem to compute with them. And these are the people who are victims of a cult. If they can smell my breath through the mask, it means the mask doesn't work. But it also, I hadn't been aware of it. You're never aware of your own bad breath. I shower every day. I do an hour in the gym, heavy lifting every day. But I eat a lot of red meat. I drink a lot of coffee. And I smoke about 10 or 15 cigarettes a day. So that's not going to make things smell very good. I took a closer look at it. I've been diagnosed with gingivitis by my dentist before. So I'm now proceeding to get a medical certificate either from the dentist or the doctor to confirm that as a result of my having gingivitis, which I brush my teeth twice a day, I floss and all this kind of thing, but it's kind of a chronic, manageable condition. I've had it for a while. As a result of that, it would be unsafe for me to wear a mask because I looked it up myself, and people with gingivitis who wear masks can find, first of all, it gives them acne and eczema on their faces, and secondly, it can accelerate gum disease, it can accelerate tooth decay. I don't have any tooth decay. I have, as I said, a bit of gingivitis, but I don't have particularly bad gums, and I manage it reasonably well. But this is why now I'm looking now to get medical certification against wearing a mask. And it would be one of the reasons, it would be under Section 5 of the statutory instrument, difficulty breathing. That would qualify for it. At the same time, though, I'm not going to be giving advice to other people. And it's interesting when you look at Dee Wall's videos, how many of the people associated with her seem to end up either being arrested, going to court, or going to jail. You'd almost think that she's unlucky, that there's something ill-omened about Dee Wall, aside from the fact that she gave out legal advice from the UK. She was quoting British statute. But let's park that. Many of these ones appear to be looking for trouble. Well, you look for trouble and you'll get it. You look for trouble and you'll get it. But my own experience of not wearing a mask is simply that in advance I told all the shops by email when possible that I would not be wearing a mask. They replied, they said that's fine. I had to bring my father to a doctor's appointment last week. It was delayed after Christmas because I'd notified them by email in advance that we wouldn't be wearing masks. So the hospital got back to us and they said, well, we can't do that. Well, I said, what's the alternative? They said we could do a virtual consultation online with your father. I said, that's fine. Then they got back and they said, no, we'll give him an appointment in January. But we'll just, we'll do it in the private clinic and we'll make sure that everything is prepared for you. So my father got his hospital appointment without wearing a mask. I didn't wear a mask. No problem. It's a particular shop I go to and they now know I don't wear a mask, so they all, the security guard says, oh, this man has an exemption. Why have I not had any trouble? Why have I not had any trouble? What's the difference? Why am I not ending up in Store Street Garda Station or ending up in court or ending up in the papers? But what I think is most legally significant is the fact, as I said, that individual called the guards on me in a supermarket. And first of all, he went to one of the workers on the floor and said, that man isn't wearing a mask. So the shop worker came over to me and said, excuse me, sir, I'm sorry to trouble you. Go on, I said. He said, why are you not wearing a mask? I said, because your branch manager gave me permission not to. Oh, that's fine. He said, sorry I disturbed you. Then the busybody starts shouting, he doesn't have an exemption. That's a lie. That's a lie. I'm not taking this any further, said the shop worker. As far as I'm concerned, he's permission not to wear a mask. Down came the branch manager and told the busybody that I had permission not to wear a mask. So the busybody then called the Gardaí. When the Gardaí came, the branch manager and security guard in charge of the shop told the Gardaí that I had permission not to wear a mask. I just sat and watched the show. I didn't get involved. I didn't video. I didn't talk to anyone. The Gardaí then cautioned that man for wasting their time and escorted them off the premises, came to me and told me there was no problem. They actually, believe it or not, the guards apologised for wasting my time. No, I said, I think it's the person who called you who should apologise. Not the shop, not me, not you. I think there's one person who should be apologising here. I said, and it's not anybody in the present conversation. So that was my story. But I think the reason why and that's new. That's more newsworthy, actually, when you think about it. It's more newsworthy than anything that's getting into the news, because the agenda of the mainstream media is to portray anti-maskers as criminals and people who, either through conscientious objection or, as it's now developing with me, for a genuine medical reason, aren't wearing a mask, are to portray us as criminals. And they're not. The criminal thing is, and if you look at a lot of the charges brought against these people, if not all of the charges brought, they're public order offences, they're abusive in a public area offences, that kind of thing. If you're told to leave a shop, you have to leave. If you're told you don't have permission to come, you can't come. There was one shop in the area that I would go to, and it was non-essential, and they said, look, it's a difficult position for us, we really can't admit you. Well, I said, that's fine, but email me when you think you can. And we're still in good terms, and I'm not going there. And it's not that I have a problem with the shop, but they're just trying to keep themselves correct. They don't provide an essential service anyway, so it doesn't matter. This is trying to get through these other videos and these other things that are kind of purporting to tell people how the statutory instrument works, or all this particular kind of thing. I'm not telling anybody that they should break the law. Far from it. I'm saying that you should obey the law, but that there are always ways of doing these things to make sure that you don't get into trouble and that you don't disgrace yourself. Because, here we are now in January. The mask thing came in August, and I've been okay. Now, as I said, inadvertently I discovered that I actually have a medical condition whereby I have noticeable gingivitis. So, that would benefit from being medically certified, and that of course would be a medically certified reason, and a very good reason not to wear a mask. But, that's my position. I can't tell anybody else what to do. If you believe that a shop or another business that you feel entitled to be served in, such as a food store for example, has mistreated you in relation to a mask, the first course of action you would be expected to take is to write to the manager of the shop with a detailed but polite complaint saying exactly time and date that it happened, which member of staff if possible that you can identify, and just say that you were aggrieved at this and that you hope it won't happen again, but that you will not be wearing a mask on returning to the shop. If they have a problem with you not wearing a mask, then they should put that in their reply. If they don't reply, then to an extent, and this is not legal advice of course, but it's my own opinion, to an extent it is an implication that they don't have a problem with you returning. If you do return and they're discourteous to you or that kind of thing, again, write in again and maybe send it by registered letter and keep a copy of your first communication with them. I'm hearing a lot of things, you see these things on social media, going to sue, going to go to my solicitor, going to do that. Don't, you're not going to sue. First of all, you're not going to sue, but secondly, even if you are going to sue, you're going to lose, because, first of all, the courts generally sympathise with shopkeepers. Usually. Secondly, if you have just gone straight into court over something without trying to remedy it through communication with them, through correspondence with them, that kind of thing, and if you haven't made clear what you'd like them to do to solve the problem, then you won't have a case and you won't really have a cause of action. In relation to constitutional challenges, that is an interesting thing, because as every day of these as these lockdowns go on every day longer, they're becoming harder and harder to justify. The propaganda on RTE and the Irish Times is unending, but the fact is that these are becoming harder to justify than, say, April or May of 2020, when the government could defend its position and say, well, we didn't know what was happening here, and sure, it's only 2 months. They were saying 3 weeks to flatten the curve. They were saying it would, carrying on to June or July. Now they're saying it's carrying on to June or July of this year, 2021. So this is becoming more tenuous, but then you have to ask yourself, are you going to be the person who takes on the system? And if you are going to be the person who takes on the system, what justification do you have? What makes you so special to take on the system? Because there are ways of taking on the system. I've been in court many times myself. I've lost most of the time. So listen, from bitter experience here. Sometimes I've lost because I brought the case not soon enough. On another occasion I lost because in the construction of the 2009 Defamation Act I couldn't prove I'd been defamed. So, if you want to make a claim of defamation, you have to prove you've been defamed. Just to remember a staff of a shop to approach you and say, why are you not wearing a mask, or you can't come in here because you're not wearing a mask, is not defamatory. They're entitled to ask you. And, a member of a shop is entitled to ask you. A person working in a shop is entitled to ask you. In relation to saying, well, I'm not barred from this electronics shop in Carlow until the owner tells me, is rubbish. The person in charge of the shop at the given time has the right to tell you not to come in. You then, if you feel that it's wrong, have the right to contact somebody superior to them and say, well, was this correct? But at any given moment, if a person comes into a shop, the person in charge of the shop is entitled to say, no, you can't come in. You can challenge it then later by writing to the owner or writing to the manager, whatever. But don't imagine that, only the owner of the shop can bar somebody. No. In the first instance, if you're told you're barred by the person who's in charge of the shop at the time, then they're entitled to do that, unless you can kind of get it overturned by the owner or somebody in a higher position. Don't be getting into trouble. Don't be looking for trouble or lecturing people or getting on a high horse when one goes to these establishments, these shops, supermarkets or whatever. It's worth evaluating why I have not got into trouble. Why, since August, but particularly now since December, I've not been bothered by anybody when I go to these shops and that kind of thing. And indeed, why, when the guards came, I wasn't charged or arrested.